The silence in the first-class cabin was deafening. Captain Richard Sterling stood over the woman in seat 1. His face red with a mixture of arrogance and rage, pointing a shaking finger toward the economy curtain. He thought he was protecting the brand. He thought he was asserting authority. But what the veteran pilot didn't know was that the quiet woman he was humiliating, Dr. Evelyn Carter, wasn't just a passenger. She wasn't just a wealthy traveler. She was the one signing his paycheck. And the moment he uttered the words, "Get out of my plane," he had already sealed a fate far worse than just losing a job. This is the story of how one man's prejudice crashed into a wall of absolute power. The rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of John F. Kennedy International Airport, blurring the lights of the tarmac into streaks of neon and gray. Inside the exclusive diamond lounge of Monarch Air, the atmosphere was hermetically sealed from the chaos of the storm outside. It smelled of expensive leather, fresh espresso, and old money. Dr. Evelyn Carter sat in a high-backed wing chair in the far corner, nursing a sparkling water with a twist of lime. She was exhausted. The last 72 hours had been a blur of acquisition meetings in Tokyo, a red-eye to San Francisco, and now finally the leg home to Zurich, where the headquarters of her newly expanded empire awaited. She wore a simple charcoal pantsuit, tailored but unbranded. No flashy jewelry. No designer logos screaming for attention. Just a pair of vintage tortoiseshell glasses and a worn leather notebook resting on her knee. To the untrained eye, she looked like an academic or perhaps a tired administrative assistant traveling on a buddy pass. She checked her watch. It was a Patek Philippe, a gift from her late father, but she wore the face on the inside of her wrist. Discreet. That was Evelyn's way. Boarding for Monarch. Air Flight 882 to Zurich will commence in 10 minutes. The soft chime of the announcement cut through the lounge. Evelyn sighed, closing her notebook. She needed sleep. The acquisition of Skyline Logistics had been brutal, a chess match against board members who thought a 42-year-old black woman with a PhD in aerospace engineering was a diversity hire rather than a shark. She had eaten them alive, legally speaking, but it had drained her. She gathered her tote bag, a battered canvas thing she'd carried since her days at MYT, and walked toward the gate. At the jet bridge, the gate agent, a flustered young man named Timothy, scanned her boarding pass. His eyes widened slightly when the machine beeped a distinct double-tone gold sound. "Dr. Carter," Timothy stammered, looking up at her. He saw the VIP owner tag flash on his screen, a code so rare most employees thought it was a myth. He opened his mouth to offer the scripted ultra greeting. Evelyn held up a finger, a gentle smile playing on her lips. "Just Evelyn is fine, Timothy. And please keep it quiet today. I just want to sleep." Timothy nodded vigorously, swallowing hard. "Of course. Right this way. Thank you for everything." Evelyn walked down the jet bridge, the damp chill of the tunnel seeping into her bones. She loved this part, the transition. The moment you left the earth and entered the domain of the sky. It was why she had bought the airline in the first place. Not for the money, but for the engineering, for the miracle of flight. She stepped onto the plane, turning left into the first-class cabin. It was empty, save for a flight attendant adjusting the fresh orchids in the lavatory. Evelyn found seat 1A. It was her favorite spot. Not because it was prestigious, but because it was the quietest. She stowed her canvas bag, took off her shoes, and wrapped herself in the cashmere blanket provided by the airline she owned. She closed her eyes, ready to drift off before the engines even spooled up. 10 minutes later, the peace was shattered. "I don't care what the manifest says, Jennifer. The weight distribution is off. We need to move the jump seaters to the back." The voice was deep, gravelly, and laced with an irritation that seemed permanent. Evelyn didn't open her eyes immediately. She recognized the tone. It was the voice of a man who was used to being obeyed without question. "Captain, the weight and balance are perfectly within limits." A younger female voice replied, Jennifer the purser. She sounded strained. "We have a light load in first today. Only 4 passengers booked." "I don't like it," the captain grumbled. Footsteps thumped heavily against the carpet. Evelyn cracked one eye open. Standing near the cockpit door was Captain Richard Sterling. He was a caricature of an airline pilot. Silver hair, perfectly coiffed jawline, rigid gold stripes gleaming on his shoulders. He looked like he had stepped out of a 1970s recruitment poster, and he carried himself with the swagger of a man who believed the plane flew only because he allowed it to. Sterling was a legend at Monarch Air, but for all the wrong reasons. He was one of the old guard, a group of pilots who had been flying since the days when smoking was allowed on board, and flight attendants were hired based on their waistlines. He had survived 3 mergers and 2 bankruptcies, and he wore his seniority like a suit of armor. He turned, scanning the cabin, his gaze sweeping over the empty seats. Then his eyes landed on 1A. Evelyn saw the micro-expression shift on his face. It wasn't just confusion. It was instant, visceral disapproval. He saw a black woman in a hoodie she had changed out of her blazer, curled up with a canvas bag occupying the most expensive real estate on the aircraft. He didn't see the owner. He saw an anomaly. He saw someone who didn't fit his mental image of first class. Sterling marched over, ignoring Jennifer, who was trying to show him the catering paperwork. He stopped at the edge of Evelyn's suite. "Excuse me," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a bark. Evelyn opened both eyes, adjusting her glasses. She didn't sit up. She didn't scramble. She simply looked at him. "Yes, Captain." "Ticket," Sterling demanded, holding out a hand. "I beg your pardon," Evelyn asked, her voice calm, possessing a dangerous stillness that Sterling was too dense to pick up on. "I need to see your boarding pass," Sterling said louder this time. He glanced at her canvas bag on the floor with open disdain. "We have strict protocols regarding upgrades and non-revenue passengers. Crew family members and staff riders are supposed to be in economy when paying customers are boarding." Evelyn slowly sat up. She realized what was happening. It wasn't the first time she had been profiled, but it was certainly the boldest. "I'm not a staff rider, Captain, and I'm certainly not crew family." "Then let me see the ticket," Sterling snapped, looking at his watch. "I have a schedule to keep and I don't have time to sort out gate agent errors. If you were upgraded by a friend at the gate, you need to go back to 34B or wherever you came from. First class is for full fare passengers." Jennifer the purser rushed over, her face pale. She held a tablet against her chest like a shield. "Captain Sterling, sir, please. This is Ms. Carter. She is—" "I don't care if she's the Queen of Sheba, Jennifer." Sterling cut her off, not even looking at the flight attendant. He kept his eyes locked on Evelyn. "We have a branding standard. Look at this." He gestured vaguely at Evelyn's attire. "Hoodies, ripped bags. In 1A. It degrades the experience for the actual high-value clients boarding in 5 minutes. Evelyn felt a cold, hard knot form in her stomach. It wasn't fear. It was the specific, calculated rage of an engineer seeing a broken system. She reached into her pocket, not for her ticket, but for her phone. "My ticket was scanned at the gate, Captain," Evelyn said, her voice dropping an octave. "I am seated where I am assigned. I suggest you return to the cockpit and prep the flight. You have a slot time to meet." Sterling's face turned a shade of violet. He wasn't used to passengers talking back. He certainly wasn't used to this passenger giving him orders. "Listen to me." Sterling leaned in, invading her personal space. The smell of strong cologne and stale coffee wafted off him. "I am the captain of this vessel. Under federal law, I have the right to remove any passenger who disrupts the safety or order of the flight. You are refusing a direct instruction from the pilot in command." "You haven't given me a safety instruction," Evelyn corrected him. "You've asked for a ticket I've already presented based on your assessment of my wardrobe. I'm designating you a security risk." Sterling lied the words slipping out easily. "Belligerent behavior. Refusal to comply. Jennifer, get the gate agent back down here. I want her off." Jennifer looked terrified. She looked from the captain to Evelyn. She didn't know who Evelyn was. The owner status was confidential and usually only visible to gate agents and top-tier management, not the cabin crew manifest, which only showed names and meal preferences. But Jennifer had intuition. She saw the steel in Evelyn's spine. "Captain," Jennifer whispered, "she hasn't done anything. We can't just—" "I said get her off," Sterling roared, causing the two other passengers who had just boarded a wealthy couple in 2A and 2B to freeze in the aisle. The husband, a man in a bespoke suit named Arthur Pendleton, looked uncomfortable. "Is there a problem?" he asked, clutching his briefcase. Sterling straightened up, smoothing his jacket, putting on his customer service mask. "Apologies, Mr. Pendleton. Just a mix-up with seat assignments. Some staff travel glitch. We'll have it sorted in a moment, so you can enjoy your flight in peace." He turned back to Evelyn, the mask dropping instantly. "Last chance? Walk off, or I call the Port Authority police. And trust me, you don't want an arrest record over a free seat." Evelyn stood up. She was tall, nearly 5'10", and in that moment she seemed to tower over the cabin. She picked up her canvas bag. She picked up her cashmere blanket and folded it neatly, placing it on the seat. "You are making a mistake, Captain Sterling," Evelyn said. She didn't shout. She spoke with the finality of a judge delivering a death sentence. "A career-ending mistake." Sterling laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound. "I've been flying these birds since before you were born, sweetheart. I think I know what I'm doing. Get out." Evelyn looked at him for 3 seconds. She was memorizing his face. She was memorizing his name tag. Captain R. Sterling. "Very well," she said. She walked past him, past the horrified Jennifer, past the confused Pendletons. She walked off the plane and back up the jet bridge. As she stepped back into the terminal, the cold air hitting her face, she didn't cry. She didn't call her lawyer. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number that very few people possessed. It was the direct line to the cell of Tobias Grayson, the CEO of Monarch Air. "Tobias," she said when he answered on the second ring. "Evelyn, you should be in the air. Is everything okay?" Tobias sounded worried. He knew she hated calling during travel. "No," Evelyn said, walking toward the large glass windows where she could see the nose of the Boeing 777 she had just been evicted from. "I need you to access the crew roster for Flight 882. I need the full file on Captain Richard Sterling. And Tobias, yes, don't let that plane take off." The walk back up the jet bridge felt longer than the flight itself would have been. The corrugated metal walls of the tunnel vibrated slightly with the wind and rain of the storm outside, creating a hollow, rhythmic drumming that matched the pounding of Timothy's heart as he saw Dr. Carter emerge from the aircraft. Timothy, the young gate agent who had been so thrilled to see the VIP notification pop up on his screen moments ago, looked as though he were witnessing a ghost. He stood behind the high podium at gate B14, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Dr. Carter," Timothy stammered, stepping out from behind the counter. "Did you forget something? Is there a mechanical issue?" Evelyn didn't stop moving until she reached the counter. She placed her canvas bag down with a heavy thud. The terminal was bustling. Passengers for the next flight were already lining up near the charging stations, and a group of tourists was arguing over luggage sizes nearby. But in the immediate radius of the Monarch Air desk, the air grew static. "I didn't forget anything, Timothy," Evelyn said, her voice terrifyingly level. "Captain Sterling has removed me from the flight." Timothy's jaw dropped. "He what?" "Does he know who you are?" "He didn't care to find out. He decided I didn't look the part," Evelyn said. She adjusted her glasses, her eyes scanning the computer terminal behind the desk. "I need you to do something for me, Timothy, and I need you to do it exactly as I say. Your job depends on your accuracy right now, not your loyalty to that pilot." "Anything," Timothy squeaked. "I saw the code. I know you're the boss." "I need access to the PA system," Evelyn said. "And I need you to freeze the flight plan. Do not release the chocks. Do not retract the jet bridge. If the ground crew tries to push back, you tell them there is a Level 1 administrative hold on the aircraft." Timothy nodded frantically, typing rapidly. "Done. The bridge is locked. The tug driver is on standby. But, Dr. Carter, Captain Sterling is already calling up. He's asking why the bridge hasn't pulled back. He's saying he's going to report me for delay of service." "Let him call," Evelyn said, pulling out her phone again. She saw a text from Tobias Grayson. "I'm on the line with operations. We are freezing the asset. I'm coming to the airport. Don't let him leave." Meanwhile, inside the cockpit of the Boeing 777, the atmosphere was thick with testosterone and misplaced self-satisfaction. Captain Richard Sterling adjusted his headset, leaning back in the sheepskin-covered seat. He turned to his first officer, David Miller. David was younger, sharp, and competent, but he had spent the last 2 years learning that the best way to survive a flight with Sterling was to keep his mouth shut and nod. "Can you believe the nerve?" Sterling scoffed, checking the radar for turbulence pockets over the Atlantic. "Walks on here looking like she just rolled out of a homeless shelter, sits in 1A, and gives me attitude. I swear the quality of clientele has gone down the drain since they started these credit card miles programs. Riffraff everywhere." David shifted uncomfortably. "Did check the manifest. Richard Jennifer seemed pretty upset. She said the lady had a valid boarding pass." "Computer glitch?" Sterling dismissed it with a wave of his hand. "Or she knew someone at the gate. Doesn't matter. My plane, my rules. I did the passengers a favor. You think Mrs. Vanderwall back in row 3 wants to sit next to a hoodie? It's about preserving the Monarch mystique, David. You'll understand when you get your 4th stripe." David didn't answer. He was looking at the EICAS screen, the engine indication and crew alerting system. "Richard, why is the jet bridge still attached? We're 3 minutes past slot." Sterling frowned. He looked out the side window. Sure enough, the accordion-like tunnel was still firmly clamped to the fuselage. The rain was hammering harder now. He keyed the mic to the ground frequency. "Ground Monarch 882. We are ready for push. Why is the bridge still attached? We're burning time here." There was a pause, a long, static-filled silence. Then a voice crackled back. It wasn't the ground crew. It was the gate. "Monarch 882. This is gate B14. We are holding you at the gate due to an administrative override. Sterling's face flushed a deep, angry crimson. He keyed the internal comms to the flight leader. Jennifer, did you call the gate? Did you tell them to hold us? Jennifer's voice came through trembling. No, Captain. I'm in the galley. We're all strapped in. The passengers are asking why we aren't moving. Sterling ripped his headset off and threw it onto the glare shield. Incompetence and absolute incompetence. I have to do everything myself. He unbuckled his harness and stormed out of the cockpit. He marched through the galley past a pale-faced Jennifer and threw open the aircraft door. He expected to see a confused mechanic or a frightened gate agent. Instead, he saw the empty tunnel. The lights in the jet bridge flickered. He walked halfway up the tube, his polished shoes clicking aggressively on the metal floor. He reached the door to the terminal and swiped his badge to open it, intending to scream at Timothy. But as the door slid open, he stopped. Timothy was there typing furiously, but standing next to him, leaning against the counter with her arms crossed, was the woman in the hoodie. She wasn't gone. She was waiting. You, Sterling barked, stepping into the terminal area, ignoring the gasps of the passengers waiting for the next flight. I told you to leave the premises. You are now interfering with flight operations. That is a federal crime. I am calling security right now. Evelyn didn't flinch. She looked at him with a gaze that dissected his soul. You're not going anywhere, Richard. She used his first name. It was a violation of the hierarchy he held so dear. Excuse me. Sterling stepped closer. His chest puffed out. You listen to me. No. Evelyn cut him off. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that silenced the entire gate area. You listen to me. You claimed I was a security risk. You claimed I violated dress code policy. You claimed I was a non-revenue passenger. Because you are, Sterling shouted, playing to the crowd. He gestured to a group of onlookers. She's refusing to accept that first class is for paying customers. I didn't pay for a ticket that's true, Evelyn said, a small, dangerous smile touching her lips. Aha! Sterling turned to Timothy. You hear that? She admitted it. Now call the police. I didn't pay for a ticket. Evelyn continued, her voice rising just enough to be heard over the airport announcements. Because I don't pay to ride on my own planes. Sterling froze. The words hung in the air, but his brain refused to process them. It was too absurd. This woman. This disheveled, quiet woman. What kind of delusion is this? Sterling sneered, though his confidence wavered slightly. You own the plane, lady. You need a psychiatrist. Timothy, Evelyn said, never taking her eyes off the pilot. Please show Captain Sterling the screen. Timothy turned the monitor around. The screen displayed the flight manifest for Monarch Air, Flight 882. At the very top in a box, highlighted in blinking gold, was the passenger name for Seat 1, a Carter Evelyn, status owner/chairman of the board. Priority Alpha 1. Sterling stared at the screen. He squinted. He read it again. The blood drained from his face so fast it left him dizzy. He looked at the screen, then at Evelyn, then back at the screen. This is hacked. Sterling stammered, his voice a dry husk of its former boom. You hacked the system. You have 3 minutes, Evelyn said, checking her Patek Philippe watch, to get your personal effects off the aircraft. What? Sterling whispered. You are relieved of duty, Captain Sterling, Evelyn said. I'm grounding you, effective immediately. The silence at gate B14 was shattered by the ringtone of the landline phone on Timothy's desk. It was a harsh, jarring sound that made Captain Sterling flinch. Timothy picked it up, his hand trembling. "Gate B14. Yes, sir. He is standing right here." Timothy held the receiver out to Sterling. "It's for you. It's Mr. Grayson." Sterling felt his knees turn to water. Tobias Grayson, the CEO. The man Sterling had met once at a Christmas party. The man whose signature was on the bottom of every memo Sterling ignored. He took the phone. "This is Captain Sterling." "Richard." Tobias's voice was ice-cold, coming through the line with crystal clarity. "I'm looking at a report from Dr. Carter. She tells me you evicted her from her own aircraft because you didn't like her hoodie. Is this accurate? Sir, Sterling tried to find the swagger, the bluster that had served him for 30 years. "I didn't know who she was." "She didn't identify herself. She was disrupting She was sitting in her seat, Richard." Tobias cut him off. "I have the cabin recordings. Jennifer sent me a text detailing the entire interaction. You profiled the owner of this airline, you humiliated her, and you delayed a transatlantic flight." "I was protecting the brand," Sterling pleaded, sweat beading on his forehead. "I thought she was a loophole traveler. You know how I am about standards." "The standard," Tobias said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than a scream, "is that when the woman who signed the check for the Boeing you are standing in wants to sleep, you let her sleep. You are done, Richard. Get off the flight." "But I have a contract," Sterling argued, panic setting in. The union won't touch this," Tobias said. "You just violated Title VII and about 6 company bylaws regarding passenger harassment. You're lucky Evelyn isn't suing you personally, though she might. Now hand the phone to the station manager. I see him walking up behind you." Sterling turned around. Frank, the station manager, for JFK, a man Sterling had bullied over catering delays for a decade, was standing there. Frank looked grim. He was accompanied by 2 Port Authority police officers. "I'll take that, Captain," Frank said, reaching for the phone. He spoke briefly to Tobias, nodded, and hung up. Frank turned to Sterling. "Badge and ramp ID now." "You can't do this," Sterling hissed, clutching his lanyard. "I have passengers on board. You have no relief pilot. You're going to cancel the flight that costs the airline a fortune." Evelyn stepped forward. She had been watching the scene with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a chemical reaction. "We aren't cancelling the flight," Evelyn said. "We are just upgrading the crew." She looked at Frank. "Is the reserve captain available?" "He's 2 hours out, Dr. Carter," Frank said apologetically. "Traffic on the Van Wyck is a nightmare." "That's too long," Evelyn said. She looked at the rain lashing against the window. She looked at the frustrated passengers inside the plane who were peering out the windows. She turned to Timothy. "Do we have a fresh uniform in the crew locker room, size 6? Timothy blinked. "I think so." "Why?" Evelyn unzipped her hoodie. Underneath, she wore a simple white blouse. "I haven't flown commercially in 3 years, but my type rating on the 777 is current. I renewed it last month in the simulator." Sterling's eyes bugged out. You're going to fly it?" "I designed the modifications for the turbine compression system on this aircraft." "Richard," Evelyn said, her voice dripping with confidence, "I know this bird better than you ever will. I don't just own it. I built it." She turned to Frank. "File the crew change. Put me in as pilot in command. Keep David as first officer. He's a good kid. He was just scared of this dinosaur. Let's get these people to Zurich." Sterling stood frozen as Frank gently but firmly took his badge. The Port Authority officers stepped in. "Sir, "We need to escort you to the landside terminal," one of the officers said. "This is insane," Sterling shouted as they led him away. "She's a girl. She's an engineer. She can't fly a 777 through a storm." Evelyn didn't even look back. She picked up her canvas bag. "Timothy," she said. "Yes, Dr. Carter. Call the cabin. Tell Jennifer to prep the cockpit, and tell her to make sure the coffee is actually hot this time." Evelyn walked down the jet bridge. This time she didn't walk as a tired passenger. She walked with the stride of a commander. She entered the aircraft. The atmosphere was tense. The passengers were murmuring. Mr. and Mrs. Pendleton, in row 2, looked up confused to see the woman who had been kicked off returning, but this time without the hoodie looking focused and sharp. "Excuse me." Mrs. van der Waal, in 3A, piped up, clutching her pearls. "Where is Captain Sterling? We have been waiting 20 minutes. Why are you back?" Evelyn stopped. She looked at Mrs. van der Waal. "Captain Sterling has been relieved of command due to a performance issue." Evelyn addressed the cabin, her voice projecting clearly. "I am Dr. Evelyn Carter. I am the owner of Monarch Air, and tonight I will be your captain." A pin could have dropped in the cabin. "I apologize for the delay," Evelyn continued. "But at Monarch, we have a strict policy against intolerance. Sometimes taking out the trash takes a few extra minutes." She walked into the cockpit and shut the door. Inside, First Officer David Miller was staring at the empty captain's seat, looking terrified. When Evelyn walked in, he jumped. "Dr. Carter." "Hello, David," Evelyn said, sliding into the left seat, the captain's seat. She adjusted the pedals. She reached up and ran her hand over the overhead panel, flipping switches with a familiarity that stunned him. "Have you ever flown with an engineer before?" Evelyn asked, putting on the headset that Sterling had thrown in anger. "No, ma'am," David stammered. "Well," Evelyn smiled, checking the EICAS screens, which were now clear of errors. "You're in for a smooth ride. I know exactly where the sweet spots are on these engines. Let's push back." As the massive Boeing 777 began to move away from the gate, Richard Sterling was standing by the baggage claim carousel, stripped of his credentials, watching his career taxi away into the rain. He had wanted to teach a lesson about knowing your place. He had just learned his. The nose of the Boeing 777-300ER pitched up at 15 degrees, cutting through the dense charcoal-grey cloud layer that smothered New York City. Rain hammered against the reinforced windshield, like handfuls of gravel thrown by an angry giant. Inside the cockpit, the environment was a sanctuary of glowing screens, humming cooling fans, and the rhythmic, reassuring click of the auto-throttle servos. First Officer David Miller watched the woman in the left seat with a mixture of terror and awe. He had flown with dozens of captains. He knew the types. There was the cowboy who flew by feel and ignored the computer, the bureaucrat who was terrified of deviating from the manual by a single inch, and the yeller like Sterling who used volume to mask insecurity. Dr. Evelyn Carter was none of these. She was a surgeon. Wind shear reported at 2,000 feet. Evelyn said, her voice calm over the headset. She didn't look at David. Her eyes were scanning the primary flight display PFD with a rapid, rhythmic cadence. "I'm keeping the speed at V2+20. We're going to punch through the turbulence layer, not ride it." "Roger," David said, his hand hovering near the flap lever. "V2+20. Usually in weather this bad, the cockpit was tense. Captains would be gripping the yoke white-knuckled, cursing the tower for the vector. Evelyn, however, held the yoke with her fingertips, making micro-adjustments that were barely perceptible. "You feel that?" Evelyn asked suddenly. "Feel what?" The turbulence? David asked, gripping his armrests as the plane jolted sideways. No. The vibration in the number 2 engine. It's a localized harmonic frequency. 0.04% variance. David looked at the engine instruments. All needles were in the green. Instruments look nominal, Dr. Carter. Evelyn smiled, a small, private smile. The sensors are calibrated to ignore variances under 1% to prevent alarm fatigue. But I designed the fan blades on this GE90 engine modification. I know when she's thirsty. Increase fuel flow to engine 2 by 0.5. It'll smooth out the vibration. David hesitated, then reached up and adjusted the fuel flow. Instantly, a low thrumming vibration that David hadn't even realized was there, a background noise he had accepted as normal, vanished. The plane felt suddenly like it was gliding on silk. David stared at her. How did you know that? I wrote the code for the EEC, Evelyn said, simply. And please, David, call me Captain while we're up here. Dr. Carter is for the boardroom. Yes, Captain. David said, a newfound respect replacing his fear. Behind the cockpit door, however, the atmosphere was far less technical and far more chaotic. The fasten seatbelt sign was on, but the cabin was buzzing with a digital energy that defied the storm outside. In seat 4F, a young man named Jackson totally ignored the flight attendant's request to put his phone away. Jackson was 22, a travel vlogger with a modest following of 50,000 subscribers, mostly teenagers who liked his reviews of airport lounges. He was currently editing a video on his phone, his thumbs flying across the screen. He hadn't just recorded the aftermath. He had been recording an intro for his vlog when Sterling had stormed in. He had captured the entire interaction, the shouting, the finger-pointing, the get out of my plane, and the quiet, devastating dignity of Evelyn walking away. He also had the second clip, Evelyn returning Sterling's meltdown, at the gate filmed through the window, and Evelyn's announcement over the PA system. Jackson knew gold when he saw it. He wasn't just going to post this to his story. This was a main feed upload. He titled it, Pilot Kicks Off Owner Instant Karma. He hit upload. The onboard Wi-Fi was slow, but it was steady. The progress bar crept forward. 10%? 30%. In the galley, Jennifer, the purser, was shaking. She was preparing the meal service carts, but her mind was racing. She had almost been fired by Sterling just for trying to do her job. Now she was serving coffee to the woman who signed her paychecks. Jennifer. She jumped. Evelyn had called the galley interphone. Yes, Captain? Jennifer answered, her voice trembling. How are the Pendletons in row 2? Mr. Pendleton looked anxious during the confrontation. They are fine, Captain. Mr. Pendleton asked for a scotch. He's asking for your business card. Give him a bottle of the blue label from the reserve stash, Evelyn said, and tell Mrs. Vanderwall that I apologize for her delay. We are making up time in the air. We should land in Zurich 20 minutes early. Yes, Captain. Jennifer hung up and took a deep breath. She looked at the other flight attendant, a girl named Sarah. Can you believe it? Sarah whispered. She's flying the plane, and she's nice. She's not just nice, Jennifer said, looking at the ceiling as if she could see through to the cockpit. She's the only one who actually cares about this airline. Sterling just cared about his stripes. Hey, Sarah held up her iPad. Have you checked Twitter? The hashtag Monarch Air is trending. Like #1 trending. Jennifer frowned. We've been in the air for 40 minutes. How? Someone on the flight posted a video. Sarah said, her eyes widening. Oh my God. It has 2 million views already.
Massosososa summusutrit.
4,000 miles below the cruising altitude of Monarch. 882. Captain Richard Sterling sat on a high stool in the generic, dimly lit bar of the airport Radisson Hotel. Outside, the rain was still falling, washing away the world he thought he controlled. He was on his third whiskey sour. His tie was undone, hanging loosely around his neck like a noose. His pilot's hat sat on the sticky bar counter, a dethroned crown. He was staring at his phone, his thumb swiping aggressively through his contacts. He needed allies. He needed the Union. He needed to spin this before the woke mob, as he called them, destroyed him. He dialed Barry, his Union rep. "Barry, it's Richard. You're not going to believe what they did to me." Sterling slurped his drink, his words slightly slurred. "They breached the contract. Unlawful termination. I want to file a grievance immediately." "Richard." Barry's voice was tight. Strained. "Where are you?" "I'm at the Radisson." "Why?" Richard, shut up. Stop talking. "Are there reporters there yet?" Sterling blinked. "Reporters, no. Just a bartender who doesn't know how to make a drink. Why would there be reporters?" "You haven't seen it?" Barry asked, incredulous. "Richard, open YouTube, or Twitter, or turn on the TV above the bar." Sterling looked up. The TV in the corner was muted, tuned to CNN. The chyron at the bottom of the screen flashed in bright red urgent letters. "Viral flight, airline owner, pilot's own plane. After captain evicts her." Sterling squinted. "What?" Then the screen changed. It was a video. A shaky vertical video taken from a passenger seat. It showed Sterling, his face clear as day, his voice distinct, leaning over a quiet black woman. "Get out!" The captions on the screen amplified his words. Then the video cut to the terminal. Sterling shouting about riff-raff. Sterling screaming, "She's a girl," as he was led away by police. The bartender, a burly man wiping a glass, looked up at the TV. Then he looked at Sterling. Then at the hat on the bar. The bartender's expression shifted from indifference to disgust. He stopped wiping the glass. "That you?" the bartender asked, gesturing to the TV with his chin. Sterling grabbed his hat. "It's out of context. That video is edited." "Barry!" Sterling shouted into the phone. "It's a hit job. You have to issue a statement defending me cite safety protocols. I deemed her a risk." "Richard," Barry said, his voice cold, "I just got off the phone with the National Union Board. They are dropping you." "What?" Sterling screamed, causing a couple at a nearby table to turn around. "You can't drop me. I pay dues." "You violated the non-discrimination clause, the code of conduct, and about 5 federal aviation statutes regarding command authority." Barry listed them off. "And you did it to the owner. We represent pilots, Richard, not suicidal maniacs. You're on your own. Don't call this number again." The line went dead. Sterling stared at the phone. He felt a vibration. Another call. It was a blocked number. He answered it, desperate for a lifeline. "Hello?" "Mr. Sterling," a smooth baritone voice spoke. It was Tobias Grayson. "Tobias?" Sterling gasped. "Thank God. Listen, we need to do damage control. I can do an interview. Say I was under stress, maybe say I didn't have my glasses on." "Mr. Sterling," Tobias interrupted, "I am not calling to coordinate PR. I am calling to inform you that a courier is currently on his way to your hotel lobby. He has a packet for you." "A packet, my severance?" Sterling asked, hope rising. "A summons," Tobias said. "Monarch Air is suing you for breach of fiduciary duty, defamation of the brand, and the costs associated with the delay. We are also freezing your pension pending the investigation into your past conduct. We have received 12 emails in the last hour from other flight attendants corroborating a pattern of abusive behavior. You can't take my pension, Sterling cried, his hand shaking so hard the whiskey spilled onto his pants. The lawyers will decide that, Tobias said. Oh, and Richard. What? Sterling whimpered. Check the lobby. The press isn't just watching the video anymore. They figured out where you're staying. Sterling looked toward the lobby entrance of the bar. Through the glass doors he saw the flashing lights of camera crews. A van with a satellite dish was pulling up to the curb. He was trapped. The flight across the Atlantic was the smoothest Monarch 882 had experienced in years. As the sun began to rise over the horizon, painting the tops of the clouds in hues of violet and burning orange, Evelyn Carter initiated the descent checklist. Zurich approach, Monarch 882. Establishing localizer for runway 14. Evelyn said, her voice fresh, showing no signs of the 8-hour flight. Monarch 882, Zurich Tower, the controller replied. His voice was unusually warm. Welcome home, Dr. Carter. The winds are calm. You are number 1 for landing. Thank you, Zurich, Evelyn replied. In the cabin, the passengers were waking up. The smell of fresh croissants and strong coffee filled the air. But there was a different energy. Usually at the end of a red-eye, people were groggy, grumpy, and desperate to get off. Today there was a sense of camaraderie. They had been part of something. Jackson, the vlogger, was filming his outro. Guys, we are about to land. The owner, literally the lady who owns the planes, has been flying us for 7 hours. And I swear, I haven't felt a single bump. If this is how she flies, I'm never flying another airline. In the cockpit, David Miller called out the altitudes. 1,000. Stabilized. Evelyn disengaged the autopilot. She wanted to hand-fly the landing. It was her favorite part. The connection between the machine and the air. My controls, she said. Your controls, David confirmed. The runway lights twinkled ahead, a string of pearls in the pre-dawn light of Switzerland. Evelyn lined up the nose. She managed the energy of the massive aircraft with a delicate touch. 50, 40, 30, 20, 10. The radar altimeter counted down. Evelyn flared the aircraft. The rear wheels kissed the tarmac. There was no thud, no jolt. Just the sudden spin-up of the tires and the gentle deceleration. Greased it, David breathed. Wow. Spoilers up. Reverse thrust normal. Evelyn called out, professional to the end. As they taxied toward Terminal E, Evelyn noticed something unusual. Usually the tarmac was empty, except for the ground crew guys in neon vests with glowing wands. Today the gate area was crowded. Is that a fire truck? David asked, leaning forward. A water salute, Evelyn realized. 2 fire trucks were positioned on either side of the taxiway, creating an arch of water for the plane to pass under a tradition usually reserved for retiring captains or inaugural flights. But beyond the trucks, there was a crowd. Ground staff, baggage handlers, mechanics, gate agents. They were standing on the ramp, clapping. Evelyn parked the brake at the gate. She shut down the engines. The hum died away, leaving the sudden silence of the cockpit. She took off her headset and ran a hand through her hair. She was exhausted now. The adrenaline was fading. Nice flight, Captain, David said, extending his hand. Evelyn shook it. You did well, David. You have good instincts. Don't let men like Sterling bury them. She opened the cockpit door. She expected to just grab her bag and slip out the side exit, maybe avoid the passengers. But as she stepped into the galley, The cabin erupted. Applause. It started with the Pendletons in row 2, and it swept back through the curtain into economy. People were standing up, clapping, cheering. Mrs. Vanderwall, the woman who had complained about the delay earlier, was standing in the aisle. "Bravo!" she shouted. "That was the smoothest landing I've ever had." Evelyn froze. She wasn't used to this. She was an engineer. She lived in the back rooms, in the hangars, in the spreadsheets. She wasn't a front man. She gave a small, shy wave. "Thank you. Please watch your step on the way out." She tried to retrieve her canvas bag from the closet, but Jennifer handed it to her, tears in her eyes. "Doctor Carter, the station manager, is waiting for you at the door, and well, everyone is." Evelyn walked to the aircraft door. When she stepped out onto the jet bridge, it wasn't just the staff. Tobias Grayson had flown in on a private charter ahead of them to manage the crisis. He was standing there looking impeccable in a navy suit, holding a tablet. "You're trending in 40 countries, Tobias said dryly, though his eyes were twinkling. "Monarch Air stock is up 12% in pre-market trading. The Carter effect, analysts are calling it. Apparently people like an owner who knows how to work." "I just wanted to sleep, Tobias." Evelyn sighed, walking past him. "Well, you can't sleep yet," Tobias said, falling into step beside her. "We have a press conference in the first-class lounge in 30 minutes. "I don't do press," Evelyn said. "You do today." Tobias showed her the tablet. "Because Richard Sterling is currently on live TV in New York, trying to claim he was the victim of a woke conspiracy and that you were drunk. We need to bury him." Evelyn stopped. The fatigue vanished. The steel returned to her spine. "He said I was drunk." "He did." Evelyn adjusted her glasses. She tightened her grip on her canvas bag. "Fine," Evelyn said. "Get the cameras ready. But I'm not changing out of my uniform. If he wants to talk about professionalism, let's talk about it." The first-class lounge at Zurich Airport had been converted into an impromptu briefing room. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the Alps, but no one was looking at the mountains. Every camera lens, every reporter's eye, and every smartphone was trained on the podium where Dr. Evelyn Carter stood. She had not changed. She still wore the white pilot's shirt with the 4 gold stripes on the shoulder's epaulettes that had been hastily borrowed but earned over a lifetime of study. She looked tired, but her eyes behind the tortoiseshell glasses were sharp, analyzing the room like a complex equation waiting to be solved. To her right, a large screen displayed a live feed from a news network in New York. On it, Richard Sterling sat in a studio looking disheveled but defiant. He was doubling down. The woman was erratic. Sterling's voice boomed from the speakers, filled with the desperate bravado of a drowning man. She was drinking in the lounge prior to boarding. I smelled alcohol on her. I made a command decision for the safety of 300 souls. The fact that the company let her fly is a violation of every FAA regulation in the book. This is a PR stunt gone wrong. A murmur went through the room of reporters. It was a serious accusation. If Evelyn had been drinking her flying, the plane wasn't a hero moment. It was a crime. Evelyn watched the screen, her face impassive. She waited for Sterling to finish his rant. She waited for the anchor to stop asking breathless questions. Then she stepped to the microphone. In engineering, Evelyn began, her voice calm, cutting through the noise we rely on data. Not feelings, not assumptions, and certainly not the desperate lies of men who are afraid of losing power. She signaled to Tobias Grayson. "Mr. Sterling claims I was drinking," Evelyn said. "Tobias, please play Exhibit A." On the screen behind her, the feed of Sterling was replaced by CCTV footage from the JFK Diamond Lounge. It was high definition. It showed Evelyn sitting in her corner chair. "This is the timestamp from 3 hours before the flight," Evelyn narrated. The footage showed a waiter approaching. It showed Evelyn pointing to the menu. The waiter nodded and returned with a bottle. He poured it. It bubbled. "Sparkling water," Evelyn said, "with a twist of lime." The video fast-forwarded. She drank 3 glasses. She worked in her notebook. She never went near the bar. But visual evidence can be disputed. Evelyn continued staring directly into the camera lens, as if looking into Sterling's soul across the ocean. "So upon landing 40 minutes ago, I voluntarily submitted to a blood toxicology screen administered by Swiss authorities. The results are already here." She held up a paper. "Blood alcohol content 0.00. Stimulants none. I was sober, Richard. Were you?" The room went silent. "Now let's talk about erratic behavior and safety." Evelyn said, her voice hardening. "You claimed I was a risk. You claimed I couldn't fly. You claimed only you could handle the aircraft." She clicked a remote. The screen changed again. This time, it showed a complex graph telemetry data from the flight data recorder, the black box of Flight 882. "This is the flight profile Evelyn explained using a laser pointer. This line represents the glide slope deviation during landing. A perfect computer-controlled landing has a deviation of near 0. The industry average for human pilots is a deviation of roughly 3 to 5%. She pointed to the red line on the graph. It was a flat, perfect razor's edge. "My deviation was 0.02%, Evelyn stated. "I flew that approach more precisely than the autopilot could, and certainly better than you have in years." She clicked the remote again. A new graph appeared. This one was jagged, messy, full of spikes. "This," Evelyn said, her voice dropping to a chilly register, "is Captain Sterling's flight data from his last 10 landings. Hard banks, late-breaking, unstable approaches. We audited your file while we were in the air. Richard." She looked at the camera. "You weren't protecting the plane from me. You were barely keeping it in the air yourself. You have been coasting on seniority and bullying your first officers into correcting your mistakes for a decade." Back in the New York studio, the news anchor looked at Sterling. Sterling was pale. He was sweating profusely. He stood up, ripping his microphone off. "This is an ambush. I'm not listening to this." But Evelyn wasn't done. "Richard Sterling," she said, her voice echoing with the finality of a gavel. "You are not just fired. Monarch Air is filing a formal complaint with the FAA to revoke your airline transport pilot license for gross negligence and defamation. We are suing you for the damages caused to the brand, and we are releasing the internal HR files regarding your treatment of female crew members to the press, effective immediately." Sterling froze halfway out of his chair on the live feed. He looked at the monitor. He saw the files flashing on the screen behind Evelyn. Years of complaints he thought had been buried. "You wanted me to leave your first-class cabin because I didn't fit the image," Evelyn said, her voice softening, but carrying immense power. "Well, I own the cabin. I own the plane. And now I own the truth." She stepped back from the podium. "I have a meeting with my design team," she said to the stunned reporters. "We're designing a new pilot training program, one that prioritizes skill over ego." "Thank you." Evelyn walked out of the lounge. She didn't look back at the screen where Sterling's career was dissolving in real time. She didn't stop for the applause that broke out among the press. She walked down the concourse, her canvas bag over her shoulder. Tobias caught up to her near the exit. He was beaming. "You realized you just became a global icon, right?" Tobias asked. "The stock is up 20%. We're sold out for the next 3 months." Evelyn stopped. She looked out the window at the tarmac where Monarch 882 was being refueled for its next journey. "I don't want to be an icon, Tobias," she said, adjusting her glasses. "I just want to be an engineer. And maybe just once I want to ride in seat 1A without anyone asking for my ticket." Tobias laughed. "I think after today, no one will ever ask for your ticket again." Evelyn smiled. It was a genuine, tired, happy smile. "Good," she said, "because I have a lot of work to do." She walked out into the crisp Swiss morning, ready to build the future, leaving the dinosaurs like Richard Sterling in the past where they belonged. Whatever happened to Richard Sterling? After the lawsuit and the public release of his flight data, the FAA permanently revoked his license. He lost his pension in the legal battle and was last heard of working as a dispatcher for a trucking company in New Jersey, still complaining to anyone who would listen. As for Dr. Evelyn Carter, she didn't just go back to the boardroom. She revolutionized the industry. Monarch Air became the gold standard for safety and inclusion, proving that true power doesn't need to shout, and it certainly doesn't judge someone by their hoodie. If you believe that competence should always outweigh arrogance, hit that like button. It helps us share more stories of justice served cold. And if you want to see more real-life drama, where the underdog takes over, subscribe and ring the bell. You don't want to miss the next flight. See you in the next story.